Today, we're going to walk through what might just be the most important few minutes in the history of humanity. And look, this isn't science fiction. This is a hypothetical, but chillingly realistic minute-by-minute breakdown of what a full-scale nuclear war would actually look like, based on military plans and the latest science. Okay, let's get into it.
Imagine getting woken up in the middle of the night to hear those words. There's no easing into it, no time to really process anything. The world you know is about to end, and you, one person, have less time than it takes to order a pizza to make a decision that will seal the fate of billions of people. This is exactly where our timeline begins.
So, 14 minutes. That's all you get. This first part of our breakdown is all about that one impossible choice. A choice you have to make with incomplete, confusing information under a kind of pressure that is, frankly, unimaginable.
And the choice really just boils down to this terrifying dilemma. On one hand, you can launch now. This is the whole military idea of use them or lose them, right? You launch your missiles back before the enemy's missiles can destroy yours in the ground. But on the other hand, you could wait. Waiting gives you a few precious minutes to try and confirm if the attack is even real. But if you wait too long, you risk losing your ability to retaliate at all, basically losing the war before you've even fired a shot.
And this really shows you the chaos of the data that's flooding in. First, your satellites. Way up in space, they detect the heat bloom from missile launches. Okay, then your radar stations confirm that, yep, these are ballistic missiles on their way. But then, bam, the other side detonates a few warheads high in the atmosphere. This creates a massive electromagnetic pulse, and your radar screens go black. All of a sudden, you're trying to track thousands of potential targets. Some are actual warheads, sure, but most are just cheap decoys. And your missile interceptors? Well, even on a good day, their success rate is not great. This is not a good day.
Now here's the thing that should keep you up at night. This whole nightmare scenario. It's not just a thought experiment. The really sobering truth is that we have been right on this edge several times before, brought there not by an enemy attack, but by simple, terrifying mistakes. I mean, just look at this list of near misses. In 1979, someone accidentally loaded a training tape, a simulation of a Soviet attack, into the actual live warning system. Oops. Then in 1983, a Soviet satellite mistook sunlight bouncing off clouds for 5 incoming American missiles. And get this, in 1995, Russian radar operators thought a little Norwegian scientific rocket was a nuclear launch, which led President Yeltsin to actually open his nuclear football for the first and only time in history.
So here's the crucial takeaway from all that. In every single one of those close calls, the world was saved not because our fancy systems worked. Nope. It was saved because some human being in the chain of command, like the famous Soviet officer Stanislav Petrov, just had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. They chose to break protocol, to wait, to question the data, and they single-handedly stopped an accidental apocalypse. But in our scenario today, there's no Stanislav Petrov. The doubts are pushed aside. The pressure is just too much. The decision is made. Launch. So now we go back to our timeline, right at the moment where everything becomes completely irreversible. And the process itself is so clinical, it's terrifying. The president authenticates the launch codes. That order zips out to launch crews buried deep underground. 2 different officers have to turn their keys at the exact same time. And just like that, all across the country, ICBMs start rising from their silos. They launch from submarines, from bombers, and as you see in that last step, there's no recall button. There is no way to stop what's coming next. And that's it. That's the moment of no return. The Russian warning systems have obviously detected the American launch, and so their missiles are in the air now too. Right now, thousands of nuclear warheads are silently arcing through the blackness of space, passing each other high above the North Pole. The question is no longer if, it's only when.
Okay, so now our focus shifts. We move from the command bunkers to the people on the ground. For millions of people just going about their day, the world is going to completely cease to exist in about the time it takes to watch a movie.
The first warhead detonates. At its core, for less than a millionth of a second, a fireball is born that reaches 100 million degrees Celsius. To put that in perspective, that is literally hotter than the center of our sun. And the effects are basically instantaneous. That fireball at ground zero, it just vaporizes everything. Gone. Then, traveling at the speed of light, a thermal pulse radiates outwards, igniting fires and causing horrific burns for miles.
Right behind that comes the shockwave, moving faster than sound, flattening buildings and turning everything into deadly flying debris. And as if that wasn't enough, the high-altitude bursts create an EMP that just fries electronics, wiping out the power grid in an instant. And then comes the next level of hell. All those thousands of separate fires that were started by the blast, they begin to merge into one single gigantic blaze called a firestorm. It's so intense, it creates its own weather system, with winds like a hurricane, sucking in all the oxygen from the surrounding area to feed itself. So if you somehow survived the initial blast in a shelter, you now have to deal with being cooked alive or suffocating to death.
Okay, so the initial exchange of missiles is over, but the dying? Oh, the dying has just begun. The worst part actually comes after the explosions. We now have to zoom way out, from the burning cities to the entire planet, to understand the true consequence: a nuclear winter.
So what exactly is nuclear winter? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. Those firestorms we just talked about, they pump millions of tons of black, oily soot high up into the stratosphere. That's way above the clouds, way above any weather, so there's no rain to wash it out. This thick layer of soot spreads around the entire globe, acting like a shroud, blocking the sun's light and causing a sudden, catastrophic drop in global temperatures. And to see what that actually means, just look at this chart. This is for Kansas, one of the world's great breadbaskets. A normal summer day, about 25 degrees Celsius, nice and warm. After the war, the average summer temperature plummets to -20. It's a permanent deep freeze. Nothing can grow, nothing. And from that one fact, everything else just cascades into a total collapse of civilization. Growing seasons? Gone. The world's breadbaskets become frozen wastelands. Global food supply chains, which are incredibly fragile, just evaporate overnight. And with no electricity, there's no way to pump or purify clean water. Mass starvation doesn't begin in years, it begins within a matter of weeks. So, now we can do the grim arithmetic. Scientists have run the models on what this would actually mean for the human population. And the numbers, they're just hard to even wrap your head around. Let's start small. Even a limited nuclear exchange, say between India and Pakistan, would create what's called a nuclear autumn. The disruption to global agriculture from that alone is projected to cause 250 million people to starve to death around the world. Okay, now let's say that regional war gets bigger. They use more of their weapons. The resulting nuclear winter gets much worse. Global food production would get cut in half. The number of people who would starve to death? 2 billion. That is 1 out of every 4 human beings on this planet. And now for the worst-case scenario we've been following, a full-scale war between the US, its allies, and Russia. The models estimate that 5 billion people would starve to death within 2 years. More than half of humanity, just gone. And here is the ultimate terrible irony. In the very countries that build and launch these weapons, the US, Europe, Russia, China, the models predict that something like 99% of the population would die. There are no winners here. The nations that start the war are almost completely annihilated by the famine they themselves created. The entire process, from that first warning on the screen to the end of the main bombing, can take as little as 72 minutes. The decision to start it all takes just 6. For decades, we have survived with these weapons on a hair-trigger alert, saved only by pure luck and the good judgment of a few brave people who broke the rules. So the question we have to ask ourselves is the one right here. How long can our luck possibly last?